All right. Hello, foosball guests. People, wow, we got a big group already. Excited to have you immediately joining us for this episode of Pandemonium. True story. Okay, Rich got on here with a button-up shirt, and I was wearing a black hoodie. And me and our other guest, is that the right grammar? We decided to immediately go put on a button-up shirt because we can't. Yeah, our guest looks better than us no matter what. But we got to bring it on this episode of Pandemonium. Is foosball broken? And I like to do a little bit of intro. I want to bring our guest in really quickly here. This is a big deal, right? Is foosball broken? I don't know. Is it broken? We have someone who's going to tell us it is broken. He's going to tell us why he thinks foosball is broken. I think foosball is a lot of different things to a lot of different people. And as an American and American foosball and my history of foosball, it's a small thing. I mean, everyone showed up to a foosball tournament in the United States on the same weekend, everyone who's like really playing, and you get just the Americans, if you're lucky, if everybody showed up, you might have 1,200 people show up. A big tournament now in the United States is like 800 people, right? And it can be petty. I mean, there's no reason for it to be petty in the United States. There's like factions and people competing for stuff. It's a really small thing. It's not the same overseas. Like my first opportunity was to go to Nantes, France and go to the World Cup. And it's a gigantic thing, man. Like they have 3,000 tournaments, 1,000 tournaments in Germany alone. They have these massive leagues. They have all these people. And whatever we're doing in the United States, they're doing it an order of magnitude overseas, right? I mean, we stream over here to a couple hundred people. They stream to thousands and thousands and thousands of people. The Foosball TV is streamed to over 1 million people easily. There's incredible amount of foosball going on. And when you get that, you get people passionate and engaged and spending their time and their money and investing for years and years and years. We're going to speak to our guest who's been involved with foosball for 2 decades now. And they know what's going on and they're interested. And remember, we're all kind of like, this is all like philanthropy for us. We're all doing this because we love the sport. We're spending our own money. We're going out there. We're doing stuff. We're spending our time. And the return is zero or negative financially. But the love is there. The commitment's there. And what does that mean? What does it mean when someone who's committed themselves to foosball for a very long time is getting ready to talk to us about why it's broken? And what the Americans look at as an incredibly successful, broad-reaching, amazing model of foosball. We see that over there because we could only hope for that in the United States. And he's going to get in here and say, hey, there's something wrong with our mechanism from the inside out. And he wants to talk about that. So I'm going to bring Rich in. Rich Marsh. Hold on a second, guys. There's our guest, Rich.
Hey, Mark.
Hey, man. Thank you for coming, man. I mean, the big part of this, the first part of this is to introduce you, right? A lot of people, I mean, of course, you're very well known, especially overseas. Smaller group of people know you in the United States. And people have people have seen you ref the biggest matches at this point in the last couple of years. You ref the championship matches. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to bring up a collage with you. And I really want you to kind of introduce yourself to the foosball community. You could just go ahead, start talking. Tell us a little bit about your background with foosball.
Yeah, sure thing. And I apologize for the button-up shirt because I've put way too much pressure on you guys. So
that's great.
That's a very British thing to do. While you bring this up, you mentioned 2 decades, and that is a scary number now. I started playing foosball back in college, so I'm like 16 years old, messing around on a table. I was lucky that I went to a university where a whole bunch of UK pro players also played. And so I stuck with it and I love the game and I absolutely still do, which is, also a message I really want to get out there. I played really intensely for 5 or 6 years during that period. I kind of reached that amateur expert level fairly quickly. I was starting to compete. I traveled a little bit around Europe. I would normally go to 1 big World Series every year, a couple of World Cups in the early days. But I wasn't prolific. And then, as is the story with a lot of people, I guess, work and life got in the way. I ended up doing a lot of business traveling. Foosball took a back seat. But if you then go back 6, 7 years or so, I threw myself into foosball and really every aspect of the game. So I started competing at a higher level around Europe. I think I've been to more tournaments than probably anybody else over the last 3 years. It might be close with a couple of people in certain years.
Miriam, maybe.
Mariam, I think, used to have the crown. But yeah, for the last 3 years, I've gone to 50 plus official tournaments. Those are just the ITSF ones. There have been unofficial leagues, all of the DYPs on the side. I'm playing constantly and I'm touring. I'm now reaching the point where I guess if I compare to the US ranking system that you guys are more familiar with, I'm one of those like high pros or inconsistent masters that is going relatively deep in events. Sometimes I'm getting podiums. Like I know the game and I'm competing in Europe. On the side, I'm probably, I think this is fair to say, the most active referee in the European scene. I didn't really do that much reffing in my early career, but I ended up doing it out of necessity. Then I started to enjoy it. And often I'm the only option as well. So in these smaller events in Europe, you will see me reffing every match once it gets deep in a bracket. Even when I come to the US now, Kentucky last year, feels weird to say last year now for 2024, but
Yeah.
I was the primary ref for all 3 of the Open finals, just because players respect me as a ref, and I've done a lot of work in that area. And even outside of those 2 things, so the playing and the reffing, I'm one of those people. I guess I'm a sadomasochist when it comes to admin and volunteering, because I am the president of the Romanian Federation. Again, they kind of needed someone to get involved and pick that federation up off the floor. And so for the last 2 years, I've been doing that role, complete voluntary basis, pouring my own money in to keep the federation going, to secure tables, run events, tournament organization, all of the admin that goes with that. And for most people, that would probably be enough foosball, or maybe they would have stopped me earlier. But I also have got involved in ITSF matters. So because of my reffing, I got involved with the Rules Commission initially. So I'm working with Dave Zeman and Tom Ure. And through a sequence of events, kind of made my way into the Sports Commission, which is probably the biggest decision-making commission that is part of the ITSF. I'm sure we'll get onto structures later and some of the issues there. So I have been involved in some of the big decisions and projects that have happened with ITSF. I know a lot of the leadership. Again, that's all voluntary. That's just time I have to commit. I've tried to make some positive changes to the game. And I guess we'll come on to why I'm so frustrated soon. But I mean, that's the intro. Feel free to dig in, Mark, if you have some questions there.
Well, I think without getting too far ahead, you immediately, like context on the structure of the ITSF. Honest to God, man, it's nebulous and a mystery to Americans. Like we see the face of it is Mr. Fareed Lunis, and then we imagine there's an entire organization behind it, and then I think if you're business minded enough, you think it can't be too expensive, because how do you pay for all these people? But like you mentioned the Sports Commission. Can you let's kind of start there, just to give people who are not familiar, which is most people, what kind of talk about the organizational structure of the ITSF, how it's figured out.
Sure. Let me take a quick step back, because I think it's worth covering kind of federations and how they lead up. So,
sure.
And I'll try and do this with the US in mind, but I have to do a bit of a disclaimer at the start that Europe behaves very differently. And then you have all of the continents actually have a very different relationship with ITSF. So take everything I'm saying with a pinch of salt, I guess. Okay. In the European model, you have a national federation for basically every country. Some of those countries actually have multiple federations, which is its own problem. But there should be one national federation that governs the game or the sport of foosball in that country. And I say game or sport because there really is a distinction. In some countries, this is really advanced. It is officially a sport. In other countries, it's a much smaller operation. It's just guys getting together in bars or clubs and playing some foosball. Each of those federations is then a member of ITSF. So International Table Soccer Federation, or the French equivalent name of it. That is run by a president called Fareed Lunis, who has also been in the game for decades. Definitely predates me. I met him fairly early on in my foos traveling career. And the structure is actually a little bit difficult to explain, because it does change, and it's very reliant on a volunteer network. So At the top level, you have Fareed, and you have a couple of other individuals who have, I guess you would call them official roles, like secretary or kind of operations management. Normally, those people are taking some form of salary, and there are a few staff in the ITSF offices who do a lot of the administrative work. And again, those are kind of salaried roles. There are then volunteers who form commissions. And those commissions, the idea of them at least, is that a group of players with perspective globally, so maybe one member from Asia, a couple from Europe, someone from the US or Canada, they come together to discuss relevant topics. In the Rules Commission, to give you an example where this works quite well, I mentioned the names already, but you have Tom Yor and you have Dave Zeman. So that's covering the US and the UK. Dave is very integrated with the European game. And there's another member called Yuri, who I think used to play in Russia. I'm not sure where he's based now, but just to give a kind of another viewpoint, those guys will come together on their own time. They will look at rule changes. They'll assess communication with referees, a whole bunch of very technical work that's happening. You have a number of commissions like that. So I believe at the moment there's something like 8 or 9 that are listed on the website. I think only 5 or 6 are really kind of active. The referee commission is the one that I was leading, or at least have been for the last year or so. Not that too much is getting done. I'm sure we'll come back to that point. And almost all of that feeds up to the sports commission. Their goal is really setting the broader strategy. So where do we see foosball going? What should we be doing? I mean, really the focus is, do we want this to be a sport? Do we want to be in the Olympics? Do we want more players? Do we want prize money? There's countless directions you could go in. The Sports Commission is really setting that strategic direction. It used to be 8 or 9 members. So I was part of that. And we would have many debates. So, Google Docs getting shared around, technical points. How do you want to structure the European Foosball Tour for the next year? Which countries do you allow to have tournaments? What should the rankings be? How does that work multi-table? Can women play in open events? All of these, very broad questions getting discussed. Unfortunately, at the moment, I believe Sports Commission is now just 2 or 3 members, of which Fareed is one of them, which kind of struck me recently as a little bit odd. And I will be quite happy to say, I think it's a conflict of interest given how the organization is structured. But almost all decisions really happen within the Sports Commission.
Okay.
And then on the side of that, you have, I believe it's called the Federation Commission, which is more involved in assessing the member federations. So all of the individual countries, having reviews, making sure that they're fulfilling their duties. And I guess trying to help them to improve as a federation. But again, that is a point where in my article, I kind of highlight how perhaps that's not really how the relationship works.
Let me stop you, because when you say that, I want to get back to it. You say there were 8 or 9 members, and now there's 3. But when you talk about the executive leadership of an organization, that's the executive leadership. If that's setting the agenda, that's what a CEO does. And so if you guys are working as a board that sets agendas, it was 8 or 9 and now it's 3. What happened to the other 6? And you don't have to give me detail. You could be in a broad sense if you have to put it that way. What happened?
Yeah. I won't name names. So a bunch of people have messaged me about this. So I know the stories. I won't share individual ones. But in general, some of the people who are still active were, I'm going to use the word relegated to subcommissions. So in my case, my portfolio was always ref focused, but I got involved in other activities that Sports Commission were discussing. Now I'm restricted to just the referee commission. So I don't even see the other topics until arguably it's too late. That's the case for a couple of the members. 1 or 2 have left of their own accord, usually because they've had some sort of falling out with ITSF leadership. Sometimes that's very messy and involves a foosball business on the side. A lot of people volunteering their time are also promoters or in streaming companies, and that gets very messy. And I think there's also been a little bit of natural attrition, but there has been no real attempt to rebuild to that 8 or 9. It does feel to me like this is the structure that ITSF actually wants. to achieve whatever it is that it wants to achieve. And again, that's maybe a little nebulous.
Okay, I'm gonna continue to get granular in this particular conversation because I think it's gonna lead. We're gonna lead naturally into the article you wrote, which is the catalyst for this whole podcast, if you want to call it a podcast. I never know what this is. All right, let's focus this in. So you get a diminishing number of members, and you get, because when you do that, you get a narrow agenda. So the agenda becomes more narrow because there's less input on what the agenda is, but you strengthen the decision making of a smaller group of people. So I will ask you if whether or not it was the intention to get down to 3 members and consolidated decision making, and you have isolated 2 people isolated, you're on the rules and someone else is on, I don't know, PR or relationships with the other federations, and so Fareed, if we want to call it that, ends up being kind of the head of a focused agenda. What is the agenda? Like, is the agenda to be an Olympic sport? And where is that? Go ahead.
Yeah, so that is the perfect question for me, because very often I get asked, as a familiar face in Europe at least, what is the ITSF doing? Or what should it be doing? It's usually one of those 2 variations.
Yeah.
Now, I can't give you a factual answer because I have not really heard recently from ITSF leadership what that overarching goal is. Now, I think if you read between the lines and you piece together some of the discussions that I have had, some of the things that have been written on Facebook in posts, I believe the main objective is sports recognition and heading in that direction, which would unlock funding. At least in Europe, that would unlock quite a bit of funding from governments and from sports bodies. Anything secondary to achieving sports recognition, if it's being worked on by ITSF, it probably feeds into that. So there are a lot of demands, and I can say this as a federation president, so I'm kind of privy to this side of things as well. ITSF pushes very hard for the federations to do everything they can do to get sports recognition in their country or in their locality, however that's kind of arranged. So we are told to do a lot of work, fill out a bunch of forms, tick a load of boxes to become sports recognized. But there are so many other things that the national federations should be focused on, like growing their base or getting access to tables or running tournaments or any number of these things, that it feels a bit like a distraction. The reason I can't give the factual answer, though, is I just don't know where you would look to get, I guess a mission statement would be the equivalent for a business. I don't know what that is. And I would really love the opportunity to have someone like Fareed on a call or a podcast like this, explaining that to people. I think that would really go a long way, actually, to getting the player base and the organizer base on side and getting good ideas from the community that help towards that goal. Now, I think the goal probably is the wrong one. I wouldn't go in that direction personally. But
you're saying whatever the goal is? You're saying whatever the goal is the wrong goal?
No, so I mean, if the goal is the sports recognition piece, my assumed goal, then I disagree with it, and I think that's a separate conversation, which I'm willing to have. But we don't really know what the goal is, and whoever I ask in foosball, that seems to be quite consistent feedback.
Interesting. Wow, man. Well, okay. So we got like I didn't want you to get too granular, if you will, on organizational structure down to like individual, memberships and that kind of thing. I did want you to give an overview because, frankly, I haven't done my research. I don't know how the ITSF is set up. It's simplified. It sounds like, there's 3 people in the sports commission that set the agenda, and there's a lot of periphery bureaucracy managing more or less the minutia. It sounds like there's a lot of busy work when you talk about stuff like checking the boxes and documentation. I think that probably has to do with managing a nonprofit and having to have your documentation in order in case you're ever scrutinized, right? That's so you guys are doing that part?
Yeah. And I think that's fair. And I have defended ITSF plenty in the past. So when these types of things come up and I get frustrated as a president that I have to do some forms, I'm fine with it because I understand roughly, I know where that's coming from, and it is the nonprofit side. But when my real frustration is, as a president of a federation, I don't really get any help from the ITSF because what I'm trying to do doesn't align with their perceived goals, or at least that's my opinion on this matter. And within the ITSF, when I'm trying to do work, for example, on ref commission stuff, I feel like I can make a small difference, but if it doesn't meet the needs of those three people who are deciding everything at the sports commission level, is there really any point in working on it?
That's cool. So let me pull this up, and I don't want to get ahead in certain ways that steal away from where we're what we're talking about. I really want to stay focused, but there's so much good information here. I want to pull this up. Let me do this here. So this is kind of why we're here today. You wrote an article that has been very, very popular amongst the foosball community. And it starts off with this "Foosball's broken." There, I said it in writing. Now, I'm not. Many people have read this article. Many people who are now in our chat have read this article. There's a link there, a QR code in the upper left there. Rich's ramblings. He's got a lot of fun stuff in his blog. This is the highly foosball current relevant one. And I'm just scrolling through here, but I'm going to defer back to you, Rich, on what this article is. If you could if you want to walk, are you ready to walk through this part now and why we're here in this moment? Is that good?
Yeah, sure. Yeah. So I will, I'll give a little bit of background, then I have a disclaimer, and then I will explain the article. So there was, just before Christmas period, I was browsing Facebook, as you do, and ITSF had just released quite a big deal, actually, an announcement about the new World Champions League, which, again, I think if you're in the US, it's so on the periphery that you wouldn't really care. But for Europe, this was a huge change to a popular league system. And 95% of player feedback on the Facebook comment thread was negative, at least negative, sometimes a lot worse. I got involved in the comments there. I tried to take some of those comments to ITSF in the official route. So I sent some emails, I had some conversations internally, and nothing really happened. And I'd already grown quite frustrated with a lot of my interactions with ITSF from all of my roles, player, referee, president, internally, everything. So I sat down when I had some free time and I drafted this article. Then I reviewed the article and I took out 20% that I thought was maybe a little too harsh and over the top. And I ended up with this blog article, which you can find on Facebook or through the QR code, as you say. Mm-hmm. And I didn't think too much about it. I just went, you know what, I'm going to post this and I'm going to see what the comments are. And this article talks about my background. So you can skip that if you've already heard me talk. How much money I spend going to these tournaments, what it's like, the lack of prize money in Europe, ITSF structures, running federations. There's a whole bunch of topics. Arguably, it should probably be 3 or 4 different blogs, but I enjoyed writing it, so I kept rage typing, and then I posted it. And it also covers, I think, kind of a big topic at the end, which maybe we can loop back to later in the podcast. Outside of all of this ITSF structuring and issues that I flag, is foosball by itself a marketable game? And, what do we need to change to bring it to the masses? What should the goal be for, growing foosball globally? So I tried to cover all of these areas. And then once I posted it, and the reason I kind of want to do a disclaimer here, I had a bit of a realization that maybe this was quite dangerous. So as I said, I at least...
for your life, Rich, were you worried about a hitman, Rich?
Not quite that level, perhaps. But I was actually a little bit worried. So I have been doing volunteer work for ITSF, as I said. There's a very strong chance that this, what's the British phrase, rubbed people up the wrong way, so to speak.
Is it rub people up or is it rub people? We call it rub people. Rub people up.
We would say rub people up, and I know that that's very dangerous phrasing, so I will I'll stick with it.
All right.
So I knew that this kind of thing could happen, and I almost expected within a couple of days to get some feedback from ITSF, be invited for a call, settle things down. Maybe they would post something in response, and that didn't happen. And no one from ITSF has really interacted with me since. A couple of people reached out within the subcommittees, but no one in that kind of exec team. And Really, I've been very diplomatic within foosball for the past 5 years, where I've been heavily involved and notable at tournaments. And I don't care anymore. I'm going to be honest. I think enough people over the years have written articles or posted on Facebook or created videos or made a big scene in their national communities. And it always gets met with a little bit of applause and a bunch of people messaging you saying, yeah, I agree with this. Someone needs to say it. But it doesn't tend to go much further than that. Partly because we are all volunteers and we don't have time, partly because no one wants to take a risk. And I think importantly, the main reason, no one really knows what to do to fix things. It's very easy to whine, it's very easy to complain. And then someone asks you, okay, what's the action plan? What do you want to do? Are you running a competitor? Like, what's your end goal here? And you have to think about that. And then someone has to go and do it. So I wanted to get this conversation out there. And when you reached out to me about the Pandemonium podcast, I thought this is a great opportunity to discuss some of the things in this article. I don't think we can get to all of them, but also to discuss, what are the next steps here? And if people are interested in solving these problems, what do we do about it? How do they get in touch with each other? And hopefully something good can happen, because I am desperate for foosball to grow. I love this game, completely do. I am committed to it and have been for years. And I will put in the work to change things for the better. I just want to do that as part of a system that actually makes it happen.
So now we can get into the nuts and bolts. We've had, this is a great introduction. You're going to start talking about like why you think foosball is broken, right?
Yep.
So if you're ready to start that, I get it. You had your disclaimer. I don't think there's anyone that doubts. Anyone who knows and cares and loves foosball knows that the 99.9% of us are doing this just because we love the sport. I mean, we're all doing this because we love the sport. No one's, if you're like really trying to make a living right now off of foosball, any part of it, like streaming or anything, it's almost laughable. I just read an article about amateur athletes, like Olympians who have medaled. These people are broke. We're talking about like, medalists at the Olympics, even gold medalists. These people are broke. And so this is just an extension of that. This is our 11th. So the reason why that's relevant is because people know and feel and understand what your intentions are. Your intentions are you care and you'd love to see things change. But you have embedded insight to what you think or what you'll describe as either dysfunction or at worst, just not necessarily, an open process. I want to talk less now. I want to kind of hear you get into what you think the real issues are.
Yeah. So what I can actually do at this point, because it's a surprisingly good segue. Tim Vaderman in the chat, who is someone from the German scene, so player, organizer, and heavily involved in administration in Germany. He's kind of asked, what way did Romania go and how this differs? And I think this is a very interesting conversation. And there's another comment there about, how do you grow foosball without the sports recognition? So yeah, I want to cover this point because I think it's very important. And this is something that ITSF has failed to understand or is ignoring. It could be either. The German model of foosball is held up as the best model you could have for a nation. Now, Germany has had foosball tables in bars for decades. I think it's a part of their culture. People already know how to play the game. There's already a big player base without any infrastructure being set up or maintained. The Germans have then come together and in their very stereotypical efficient style, I won't mock it too much, they have built the bureaucracy around it. They have done fantastic things to build playing clubs, to make sure money is flowing, to get tables for tournaments, to organize these big tours. And naturally, the game is growing very quickly. And so it's natural to go in a direction of getting the sport recognized. That's kind of a logical next step. The thing that ITSF has really missed here is Germany has a table manufacturer in their backyard. So Leonhardt exists in Germany. They have a huge vested interest in selling their tables and supporting the professional foosball scene, at least to some extent. So Germany is in this great position where a table manufacturer wants to work with them. They save a ton of money. They already have a player base that wants to play, and they just have to do the admin. I say just have to do the admin like that's an easy thing. I'm not downplaying all of the effort that goes in, but they don't have to solve the big things. Now, in Romania, if I go back 2 years, we didn't have a federation, so ITSF didn't recognize us. I had to step in and, from a position of a €0 bank balance, do everything that ITSF wanted. So that was all of the forms, all of the sports codes, all of the documents. That part's fine. I can handle it. I had maybe 50 to 100 people playing foosball somewhere in the country, most of them in the capital of Bucharest, which is a small place, and most of them within like 1 or 2 bars. And tables were only there because there was a business owner who ran a business with foosball tables. So again, someone trying to grow the game. I could try to help run tournaments in that venue, but it wouldn't have really done much at all for the federation nationally. So we worked tirelessly, and I will shout out Sylvia Pintilli, who I'm sure you do know. She has kind of been my partner through most of the Romanian federation setup. We battled legally to become a non-profit over here, which was not straightforward. And we went out and we did a table deal with Leonhardt. We did that, and we managed to get some tables reduced price for free on leases, a kind of very sweet deal to start growing the game. Not through anything ITSF offered us. We had to go via Rico, who owns Kicks in Hamburg. It's one of the biggest, probably the biggest foosball venue in the world. He has something like 20 tables. It's a foosball bar. People have to go and visit because it's insane. He did a lot of work for us after we called in favors. We used Tony as sort of celebrity status. We finally got hold of some Leonhardts. We gave those to clubs. We helped the clubs set up. We helped them run events. I put money and effort into table transport and running a national tournament just to get those players together so that the community can grow. A lot of national federations are in exactly that position, where they are desperate to find people who are playing, to put tables in places where they're going to be played, and to let the scene flourish. And all of that needs to happen before you are close to the model that Germany can employ. I think ITSF is missing that point. The Romanian balance right now, if you look at our bank balance, it's technically just above zero, but I'm owed something like €2,000. And that's just an interest-free loan to keep things ticking over. That is the same in so many Central and Eastern European federations who are desperate for ITSF to help them grow the game and achieve that goal, but they get no support. And I would even go as far as to say the support has sometimes been negative. When I reached out to ITSF, and I've spoken with Farid about this, I said our number one challenge for growing foosball was getting hold of tables. It is, if you don't have tables, you can't do anything else. I was told repeatedly that I would be put in touch with table manufacturers, and nothing happened, and my time was just wasted. So we went and we did it ourselves. And so many good things within the world of foosball, both in Europe and abroad. I mean, you have like Ryan's new tour with World Foosball Tour. You have, is it Foosball Clubs USA? I forget the branding, but you know, that big club initiative. So many European federations that are running their own tournaments and doing their own programs, but they are fully self-funded to try to get there. And that is the necessary baby steps for this sport or game to grow. You know, we need people playing. And unfortunately, ITSF is instead focused on replicating the German model of just run some clubs in a league and you'll be fine, and ignoring all of those base problems that federations have to solve. So yeah, where's my value? That's kind of my big question.
Yeah, you know, someone is knocking at the door, man. Someone's knocking at the door. This gentleman is knocking at the door for a reason. He must have something to say. He's actually physically knocking at the door. We got to bring in a extra special guest. Look at who the cat dragged in. What's up, man?
I don't have a cat. I do have a really cute little puppy, though. Um, no, just sitting here listening to Rich, fascinating stuff, and it's really refreshing to have someone who has opinions, but also backs them up with action. As somebody who has been involved with the sport here in the United States for many decades, we'll put it that way, and also has experience internationally with ITSF from a different point of view, not a political point of view, more of the entertainment side of it, perhaps. But to hear someone who speaks so clearly about what needs to be done and what is the existing situation is really, for me, over the years, how many times have I seen people come in and say, "Look, we need to change this, we need to change that." They complain about this, they complain about that, and then don't follow it up with action, or at least action beyond maybe that first hurdle or challenge that they run into. So, a couple of things really strike me here. That's one of them. The other one is, Mark, we need to get Fareed and Rich both on the show simultaneously so we can kind of iron out some of this. And I think, you've educated me greatly. As much as I have followed foosball for those multiple decades, still, I just sat here over the last 36 minutes and really learned quite a bit. About what's happening internationally, and hopefully I can also help, but maybe lend a little perspective from the American point of view, which maybe, and Mark, you mentioned it early, that Americans here don't really, beyond us qualifying players for a World Cup every X number of years, do we really understand here in this country what having an international federation means and how it can be effectively utilized by individual countries and federations. And so that, I think, again, comes down to transparency from the top. It comes down to having strong federations, which has been an issue in this country for several years. And if anybody has listened to my podcasts, it's been a while, but previous to that, it is about having a strong federation here in America, which we do not. Having an independent federation, which will help get us in the door for sponsorship, help to create more players. And we'll touch on that a little bit more here in a minute, because I do want Rich's point of view on player creation. But again, Rich, having someone as well-spoken, well-written as well, great article, who also is willing to do as opposed to just express an opinion. And my last thought, I guess, Mark, you mentioned 99% of us out there just play foosball. We understand we're not going to make a living at it. We're not going to be, paid for what we do. We do it for fun, and that's fine. And every one of those 99% do have an opinion, but it's probably 1% who actually end up having the wherewithal or the motivation or whatever to get out and do something. And that's really what it comes down to. Let's, as individuals, as local federations, as regional federations, as national, let's make it happen. We individually make it.
Just the last 5 seconds, your audio, just the last 5 seconds, we're getting the crackling. I think it's your AirPods, but it was only the last 5 seconds, Jim. So your audio is it just me? Can you hear that?
Yeah.
No, I hear a crackling as well. I think
it's a crackling. Yeah, just the last 5 seconds. What I'll do is what I was going to say, Rich, is there's this really new popular sport. It's got all kinds of sponsors and investors. It's called slap, and you slap the guy as hard as you can with your right hand. And it would be really fun to see you and Free just sitting across from each other, slapping the shit out of each other.
I will be really honest here. So I've spent a lot of time, like I've spoken with Fareed a fair bit over the last couple of years, especially, and I don't think his heart is necessarily in the wrong place. I think his view on what needs to be done in foosball is misguided, and I think that is a view that's shared by a lot of people. And he's been.
I gotta stop you because this needs some context. When you say his view is misguided, we're still unclear. If you're saying directionally, the lack of clarity in the direction is the problem. That's one thing. If you're saying that you kind of have a feeling for where his view is and is misguided, that's another thing. So go ahead. I want you to just kind of speak to that.
Yeah. So I believe, and it would be great to have Fareed here because I'd be happy to have a back and forth. I don't mind the tough conversations. He is definitely pushing this whole sports recognition piece, and he wants to create. I think he wants a universe where foosball is more marketable for sponsors and for TV broadcasting. But then a lot of the actions that happen behind the scenes don't really back that up. And most of the projects that are getting worked on just seem to be tinkering with tournament formats and nations events and things that don't really make sense in the context of that bigger strategy. So yeah, I guess I will reiterate. I want to hear first what that big strategy is. Then we can really start to argue and debate the minutia that goes into it.
Okay, that makes sense. You got a couple questions here. One, Rich, what do you expect from ITSF to grow foosball in your country? That's from Maxi Foos.
Yeah, so this is a good question. I've been asked this by ITSF, and I've given my feedback quite a few times. Any help with table deals? We have solved this now for Romania, but a lot of countries struggle. Even the ones that have a manufacturer, it's not easy to do those deals. ITSF should have a lot of weight that it can throw around to give access to discounted tables or rental ideas, or even sort of drop shipping tables in for tournaments. That is what's going to get people playing in the first place, is having venues with tables and having tournaments that they can attend. And that's all about grassroots development. Anything that ITSF tries to help with, like running, what have they tried to offer help with? Running like ref clinics and stuff in countries. That's something that might be quite useful, but it targets the wrong part of the game. That's the professional tournament scene. That's doing nothing to get me 10,000 players playing every week. So anything there. Financial help would be fantastic. I know that's a lot to ask for. But anything that keeps costs down for smaller federations. Membership fees have been increased this year. That is a big point of contention. Some of these federations, I know we've been talking together, bunch of presidents on one messenger thread writing a complaint letter because we're already sending a bunch of money to ITSF. We're not getting it back. We're not getting any help. So increasing it is, just a kick in the face.
Are you at liberty to describe what that number is? What is that, the request, and what was it before?
Yeah, so you used to pay as a national federation. There was a €250 flat fee for the year. And then you would pay €2 for each of your members that needed an ITSF license. And even the ones who didn't, you would probably pay. For most of the small nations, that's only coming to €400 or €500. We just don't have that many members. That is changing. So the €250 flat fee will go away. And instead of the federation collecting the money, I believe the intention is for players themselves to directly pay ITSF €10 instead of €2. So the federation is now has to collect its own membership fee, and we need that money to operate. The players have to pay more to attend ITSF tournaments or compete in leagues. And I guess ITSF gets a little bit more money, at least from the maths that we've done. They have more cash to spend on something. I'm not sure what the something is.
And you're saying your contention is already upside down, if not in the red, or working on borrowed money. In your case of Romania, they're owe you a $2,000 IOU. You're saying that money doesn't exist to begin with. Like
it doesn't exist. And asking every federation globally to pay the same membership fees, when you are talking about, in the US, $10 a year for a membership, it's nothing. And I understand this. In the UK, it's the same. I'm happy to pay my £20 every year. In Romania, the average salary is €600 a month. This is a very different state of being.
Very interesting. Yeah. Or in the Philippines,
can you guys...
in some village in the Philippines, they got to pay you with the chicken. Just kidding. What do you got?
Can you hear me okay? I switched just to these headphones. And you've illuminated really well, Rich, the existing circumstances. And perhaps, as you say, countries do need to be individualized as to what, depending on their particular economies and what particular players can afford. Moving forward, what would you do? What would you suggest the ITSF does? Specifically, maybe 2, 3, 4 different items that you could detail moving forward to make changes that are in your eyes necessary.
Sure. So I had a bit of a pre-chat with Mark about this because I've been running through options in my head. I think the first thing that I would like to see, without a big change at all to any structures, is a better feedback mechanism from players, from federation members, from organizers. to actually like get a bit more foresight of some of the changes ITSF are suggesting, for that feedback to be listened to, and for more transparent statements to be posted on social media. You know, whether that is Fareed coming on a podcast or every member of ITSF at least getting an email saying, here's what's happening, here's why. That's my number one request. And I think that's easy and is just a gimme that needs to be done. In terms of bigger changes, I don't think we can grow foosball if we keep treating it as this small sport and just tinker around the edges. Personally, I think something like darts with huge sponsorship and less focus on the game itself, as sad as that is as a kind of elite player, I think that's what we need to accept. And enough promoters willing to try that with ITSF supportive of their efforts. That I think is the key. I know plenty of people have already messaged me after this article saying, I would love to run an event like this. I would love to have a wild crowd. I would love to build up characters and have people cheering and sell tickets and do whatever. I think that's a great idea. You know, let's try it. Let's see where it breaks down. Let's see how you need to stream that. You know, do you need to productionize it? Can it be live? There's a whole bunch of follow-up questions. But ITSF is reluctant to go in that route, and I think they want to control the output and keep it within the current confines of what a World Series looks like.
Yeah,
and that needs to be broken down.
And I think maybe just as a quick follow up here, Mark.
Please.
And the DART model is a good one, right? The DART model is a good one. They surround the particulars of the match itself, which is still, you do still focus on whether that guy's going to hit that triple 20 or double bull or whatever, but they surround it with this show and with the players pumping the fists and getting in the opponent's face and interacting with the crowd. And all of that is, I think, something that we need to look at. But maybe that needs to be done first before the ITSF then could accept it, right? And they would if it's successful, you would think.
I think it's possible. It's possible to go in that direction. Where I'm nervous, and this is the point I will make about ITSF, where I think I might get the most negative feedback from them directly. I get the impression that ITSF will try to shut down any promoter that tries to go in that direction. Now, that's solely my opinion. Like, I will take that one on the head if anyone wants to come at me, but I know from speaking to people who have had foosball businesses and been involved with them that these conversations get shut down. ITSF doesn't want to try to promote those activities or even test them out. And one clear example that I can really back up here, the Sports Commission, a long time ago when I was still involved, there was a big decision point and everyone agreed we need to simplify the rules and test it for a few tournaments. That project was greenlit and I thought this would actually be great for the game. And then all of a sudden, out of nowhere, the direction changed, everything halted, and we were back to just playing the game the normal way.
I'm going to take about 3 minutes here just because I feel emboldened by a quick opportunity. And Jim knows all about this, and some people know all about it. I mean, Ryan Moore knows all about it. As a matter of fact, some of the investors I worked with, Ryan and I had meetings with them in 2020 over a completely different business initiative. But I don't want to make this about me, but it is about me for like just a couple minutes here.
It always
I did
is.
a bunch. It always is. I did a bunch of work. Okay, people know about this work that I did, and a lot of people didn't understand or why they didn't have all the pieces. Because frankly, my business is my business, and my caricature in foosball or whatever you want to call it, those are separate things. But when I got involved back in foosball during the pandemic, by the way, my affiliation with Inside Foos was an impulse reaction during the pandemic. It was 2020. We don't have to go back down memory lane. I decided to focus my business energy on foosball. And there were some very simple premises. One of the simple premises is foosball marketable. You can think it all you want, but you got to do the work. You got to do the work. And so I got in touch with very close friends of mine that I had invested in other businesses with, successful businesses, startup businesses that sold, great friends of mine. I did the work. I looked at what people really, demographics, like understanding what people, and I'll tell you some of the math here. People don't care how many millions of people are watching foosball. Eurosport had 50 million people watching foosball. If it was about just eyeballs on foosball TV would be rich. They've had front page Twitch multiple times. That's not what it is. What it is how long someone will watch foosball, because you could get 30 million views just by paying bots to watch your sport. It's how long they'll watch and if they'll come back and watch again. And when you really do the work, foosball in its current iteration with its current rules is not marketable in its current form. It's just not. You can get some views here and there. You can do some stuff. So the reality is, when I did the work, what I did was I created something called a Thunderdome. It's a format. It was a pilot. It was a test to create a narrative. And I sold that narrative to investors who said, yeah, we'd buy this. What you do is you package it, you record it. You got to highlight the players. You got to do stuff to the rules. One of the big things with the rules was taking out the distraction rule and putting in a disruption rule to invigorate the crowd, to get involved, just like darts. Because when you have a distraction rule, the crowd doesn't want to get involved. You want the crowd involved. So anyway, all this stuff, do the work, and then you've got a package to put together and you sell it to ESPN for advertising minutes. ESPN gives you sell the advertising minutes, and that's how you put money from the top down. So what ITSF does, God bless you, these other sports do, because they get money from the players. They grow the sport from the player base, right? You got to get more players. That's not my thing. I didn't care about growing the player base. That's one way to do it, and that's someone else's effort. My thing was, how do you bring money in from the top down? So the playbook is written. I was successful at it. I didn't take the money in the end. I didn't have time. I got a family. I had a real job. There's really no amount of money that's going to take me out of my real job. But this is to your broader point. Why this comes back to you, Rich, is because there are other ideas. That's just one idea. There are all these ideas. There are all these creative ways. Maybe it's not taking out the distraction rule. Maybe it's some other but there are a million ideas. You just got to be willing to execute them. You got to be willing to do the work and execute. If you're telling me that creative ideas get shut down and they're not explored, well, that's another thing. I want to bring you back to the forefront. If you're telling me that people are willing to try new stuff, but the mechanism in place currently isn't open to that, is that kind of what you're saying?
I think broadly, yes. If you want to have your tournament sanctioned by ITSF, which most organizers do want, because some players will go for ranking points, they want to have this on the calendar. They don't necessarily want to go to a tournament that's taking a risk. Then you have to meet a whole bunch of criteria, some of which just cost you a bunch of money. So like having finals areas and staging and things like that. But there are specific formats that you are supposed to play to, and experimentation is quite limited. It would take, I think someone would have to commit to running a small tour of events across Europe or broader. I'm not actually sure where the best place would be for it. Commit to running them, find sponsors, do the marketing, all of these things that are possible, and then prove that model works so well that ITSF can't ignore it anymore.
I see where you're going with it. Yeah. Jim, I went on one of my trademark rants. I think I asked for 2 minutes and took like 4 or something. You want to get back into the fold? You want to come back into the fold?
Yeah, no, I lost my connection there for a minute. I'm now connected to my my hotspot, but we are extremely cold here in Durango, Colorado today, so maybe that had something to do with it. No, I mean, certainly we need to change the way the sport is viewed. Mark, you mentioned, I think before I dropped out, that trying to sell the sport to non-players has always been a challenge, and believe me, I've encountered that over the years. It's trying to appeal to a viewing audience that really doesn't understand completely what's going on. When I would commentate it, I would have to change my commentary, but I'm not sure that was ever good enough, even when we were doing those big numbers with Eurosport, with the World Cup, etc. But again, we're getting back to a piece of a pie that isn't all that big. And for me, and especially here in America, it is about building the number of players and how we go about doing that. As it is, and I wish Ryan Moore nothing but the best of luck as he takes over from Mary and pushes that World Foosball Tour forward. Nothing but the best of luck. But still, are we looking at creating players? Because really, when it gets down to it, that's our audience. As much as we want to become an Olympic sport, I'm not entirely sure that's a reality. The pursuit of the Olympics, I agree with. The fact that it's going to happen, I don't necessarily. But a creation of player base and appealing to that player base, selling to that player base, maybe is the way we have to go about this. Although, as we talked about before, having this whole darts, and if you've never seen darts on television, it's awesome the way they market it, and it took them from here to here once they changed the way that they displayed their sport. And so, Mark, the Thunderdome was as good as any approach that we have had, certainly here in America. I would agree with that kind of approach, where you build up characters, where you do get away with that distraction rule. Disruption rule, yes. Distraction rule, no. So, Mark, I'm in agreement with you on that. And again, I think it comes down to, and again, transparency from the ITSF would be important, but also individual federations finding a way, maybe even beyond that, to work together and brainstorm and come up with approaches, universal approaches that could actually push the sport to where most of the players want it to go.
You know what, Rich? We're the elephant in the room, dude. Like you're particular. I mean, you're invested and embedded in ITSF now. You're coming out and saying there's a lack of transparency. You're saying that you don't agree with the direction is not necessarily being handled to the satisfaction of the broader group of people that are putting the work in. You're saying that the smaller federations are getting penalized. You're saying a lot of stuff. What's your relationship going to be like with the ITSF after this podcast? Let me ask that question.
Yeah, that is a fair question. I will answer that through the lens of some others' experiences. So, as I said earlier, actually, I'm not the first person who has spoken up. I might be the first person who's written as extensively and then followed up with a podcast, but I'm definitely not the first person to write about this or to complain. I know a lot of people, and many of them have messaged me in the last week or so, who said, good for you for doing this. I tried to do the same. I was just cast out by ITSF. And these are ex-presidents. These are people who've worked on commissions. You know, if you make enough noise and you aren't a yes man, sometimes you get chastised for it. I don't mind. I mean, I'm going to keep going to tournaments as long as they let me. I'm going to keep playing. I will keep refereeing because I enjoy it. Maybe not as a favor for some people anymore, but I will certainly, put the work in where I need to. And if there are organizers or unions or any other idea that comes up and someone wants my help, I'm more than willing to get involved there. Like, I still have the time and I want to do something. I imagine that ITSF will just quietly usher me out of commissions, and I'm okay with that. If there's any further punishment for just speaking out, I think that is a much deeper problem, and it would be good to expose it. I don't think it will happen. I think I will just kind of quietly depart ITSF duties.
Interesting. Do you think?
I'm not sure that's the case. And in my experience, in dealing with Farid Lunas in the ITSF, there have been a number of people over the years who maybe didn't follow along as they should. Right. I feel like Farid, and to his credit, is someone who appreciates dialogue, whether it's pro or con, to his thinking. And I would hope that that isn't the case, because I think what you're doing is important. And in a democratic sort of environment, it's important to have people come out and speak against, right? That's where you elicit change. I would hope, at the very least, in my experience, and again, it's more of a peripheral experience than you, someone who is so deeply embedded. But I would hope that's not the case, because individuals like you are badly needed. There are very few that I can point to like you, who may be stirring the pot just a little bit, but in a way that is important, in a way that needs, I think, to be listened to. And I would hope that the ITSF would do just that. And I think they would.
You got a question
without
here.
penalty.
I want to ask you something first before you get to the question in front of you. What are the looming challenges for the ITSF? So here you are, you wrote an article, but you're prepared to be pretty engaged in behavior. You're making yourself available to other interests that may pose a counter offering. Let's avoid the word challenges if you want to, but like an alternative offering to what the ITSF offers. What do you think? Are there any looming challenges or anything that what's the next step for you if it's not directly participating in the ITSF as you currently are, is the question, I guess.
Yeah, so that makes sense. So I would like to be as hopeful as Jim, and I know he says some very nice things there. I'm not convinced, but I do hope I can still do things there. I believe, so there are lots of murmurings at the moment of creating some sort of players union to do feedback, to kind of, as you mentioned earlier, actually, get some of these federations together and talking, and players together, and then pass that feedback to ITSF in a structured way, so that the conversations are easier to have, and we can try to direct the strategy. If someone wanted me involved in that, I'm happy to be involved. I think the only other thing I can see on the horizon are competitor tours that don't try to get sanctioned by ITSF and just run their own thing for the players. And there have been examples in the past of that happening. Jim is very familiar, I'm sure, with Players for Players. That was basically their entire model. Unfortunately, they kind of had a big hit during the pandemic, and I'm not sure that they could recover to the level. And they're now working with ITSF. That relationship seems to be okay. But it wouldn't shock me if there are more tours like that spring up, or events like a Thunderdome. Things that try to rock the boat a little bit.
Let me ask you a question. I want you to get to the question down here in a second. Let's imagine, someone has some money and they want to have a Thunderdome. I have 3 versions of it. I have a Masters Invitational event. Thunderdome is for non-pros. I got something called the Lilith Invitational. That's for all women. It's a pretty cool idea. Anyway, someone wants to throw one of these things in Europe, and it ends up being like a 50,000 US tournament. Probably 60 to 7% of that money is from entry fees. The other part is sponsorship or whatever. Does ITSF try to be obstructionists, or do they not care? Or do they just like, hey, you do your own thing, it's fine, we're happy, run your big tournament, it's not a problem? Is that pretty much?
Yeah, if you don't try to get that event sanctioned, and I will be contentious here, if you don't try to name it something that the ITSF doesn't like
the World Championships
I would probably avoid calling it like the European Open or something, but yes. If you were to just run a big tournament, ITSF aren't going to stop you doing that. They're not going to limit players turning up and playing. So I think that's the route to go in, but someone's going to have to be brave and just run something great.
I think this is, once again, I have no antagonistic relationship with the ITSF. I just think if there's this much dissension in the current model, people are going to run tournaments. They're going to run tournaments, and hopefully, because it is one big group. Hopefully, you guys aren't hoping no one tries to throw a tournament on the weekend of the World Cup or anything like that, but that kind of thing. I talked a lot, man. There's a question in here, and I'm interested in your answer to it. Go ahead, Ray.
Yeah, so I'm going to answer this from 2 perspectives. So as a player, and for the people who haven't seen me play, I play a lot faster than most. I mix things up. I'm a little bit crazy, especially in singles. I would be completely happy with far more open rules and almost to the point of trash talking and really competitive matches, and just play and stop getting distracted and don't care if someone in the audience drops a bottle. Like just get on with it. As a referee, I also think that view is shared by a lot of the more talented players in Europe. It's just that the game has become very quiet and efficient and boring, and that makes me sad. As a referee, I would also love this. I get asked so many questions of, was this a distraction, or was this very complicated series of events a foul, and where do I look it up in the rule book? And it's too complicated and it needs to be simplified. And I will back anyone who attempts to make that happen.
I appreciate that, man. That's. I feel like you answered. I feel like I put that question in there for you as a layup. Let me put another one in here, Rich. Let's see. There's a big one in here. And we'll get your take on this too, Jim.
You want me to go first on this, Mark?
Yeah, please do.
I like this question. I think so. Where Romania has been successful, and I'm also going to give a shout out to Steve, who is in the chat, because he's doing a very good job at the moment in the London scene in the UK. Social foosball events. So, real grassroots, beginners, no complicated rules, just get together, have fun, do a DYP. That is how you start to grow the volume of players. They need to go to a venue, they need to have fun, they need to come back, meet friends, and then a certain percentage of them are going to stick around, get better, and come to your pro tournaments. Anything that we are doing to try and grow from the top down, it doesn't work. It doesn't work in any sport. Like, you need people playing first before you can grow it. Then once you have a critical mass of players, you can professionalize the top end of the sport, you can broadcast it, and you will expand your reach. But we really need to do the grassroots part.
Jim, what you take a shot?
I certainly don't disagree with that. You need fun is what got me into the game originally, and I'm sure most players would say that. Playing at my local DYP, going to my first tour event, these were incredibly fun, and it's what brought me back. So I don't disagree with that. But I think there's also this other parallel universe where, call it the chess game side of foosball, right? Where it is taken down to the nth degree, every little movement, taking your time, all of this. The American style that was developed in the 1970s, the pro players who are idolized, I think that's an important ingredient to this as well. But I don't necessarily think it's either or. I think it can be both. And I think it needs to be both in order to kind of take those players who do want to become chess-style players, who do want to become potentially professional players, despite the lack of money that exists now. We still want to have that available to them through these 16, 32, 64 great players that show us that style of game. So while I don't disagree with that fun part, and again, I think it's time for a shift over to a dart style, over to making sure that fun comes before anything. I certainly agree with that, but not by sacrificing what these players have put decades into in order to achieve winning, as entertaining or non-entertaining as that might be, that style of play. And that can't be sacrificed. That needs to continue to exist as well. But I've always been a proponent of, these big open competitions, the American approach, the American style, the antiquated, really, if you will, American approach to foosball, where everybody plays. It's open. So the lowest player may play the number one team in the first round, all of this. That style I've never really agreed with. There have been attempts to really showcase those top players, give them their own event, or make the lower ranked players qualified to get into this upper 32, 64, or whatever. So while I don't necessarily disagree with that approach from the bottom, I also think we can kind of come at it from the top, and almost have to as well.
I have a list of questions here, Rich. I wanted to make sure I got to these, and I think we've talked about the reality of running a small federation. We've talked about the benefits or the lack of benefits of the ITSF a little bit. We talked about foosball needing big changes to grow. One of the things, I don't know if we want to get to this, the U.S. model and how that compares to models, or because the U.S. model is a kind of an antiquated model of doing things. Did you have some opinions that you wanted to discuss on that?
Yeah, so I mean, I don't feel as much of an expert here, but as Jim knows, like, I've been to the US plenty of times for Foos. At least recently, I try to come over once or twice a year. Vegas and Kentucky, right? I'm coming to the big events. For me, it's similar problems. There's no real federation here, so it's more I'm just talking about the tour and the style of event, but the players are funding everything. I mean, that is the reality, and that's what we need to get away from. Mm-hmm. I'm actually quite positive about what Ryan could do here. I think as a businessman, him getting more sponsors on board and shifting some of that away from the players, it could happen. But I agree with Jim as well. Just running a big double elim bracket where your amateurs play your elite players, it's dull. It's been done a lot. You often play the same matches. Even when I go abroad, all of the Americans are new to me, or most of the matches are new. I can see how happy my opponents are to play someone different. So a slightly different style,
so
someone
true.
I don't know the name of. Like, it's fantastic for them. So
all you got to do is come to the table with an accent, and they'll be like, "Hey, this is someone new." Yeah. Anyway,
that's true. And sometimes I fake the accent and I make them guess where I'm from, and that's
I've done that as well. I've done the same thing. But here's the problem. And again, I wish Ryan nothing but the best. But talking about getting sponsors to sort of supplement that whole player entry model that we've lived with here for literally almost 50 years now. In fact, 50 years really this year. That isn't a model that's going to be effective. But also getting sponsorship involves having more than 800 to 1,000 active players. Bottom line is, and of course, the great John O'Brien, you mentioned the Foosball Clubs USA earlier, was a man who was getting the kids involved, was actually developing, was somewhat of a feeder system for the Pro Tour, at least it appeared that way. And unfortunately, we lost him and that idea. But if we're still dealing with that same size of diminishing pie, because again, the American players, if you do the average age on American foosball players, you're looking conservatively 40 to 45 years old, right? How much longer are they going to play? How much longer are they going to live? Sort of thing. But we're still dealing, but we're still dealing with this same size of a pie. And that pie has to continue to increase. We have to get to a position where we have a federation that gets our foot in the door of potential sponsorship, because without it, you're not getting your foot in the door of any major sponsor without a federation. And B, where are these players coming from? Where are we going to have the numbers necessary to get sponsorship? And without any sort of feeder system at the bottom, all we're doing is dropping off the back end. This ever diminishing, and I'm speaking only of America right now, but this ever diminishing size of pie. Yes, it's nice to have some fresh vision, as Ryan is doing. Let's bring technology in. Let's bring a little bit of a new look at things from maybe what his mom was doing, and not to diminish what she did as well. But we're still dealing with a relatively small pie.
I'll just speak to this once again, I'll take my 2-minute stab that'll become 3.5 or 4 minutes. When you do the work, people want a return on investment. If someone has a 20% return on their dollar, whatever money they put into your business, they want 5 times that in revenue. So what are you selling? And if you have foosball that, can capture X amount of people, but they're never going to come back and they're not going to watch for longer than 9 minutes, because foosball has been described to me as people from the outside looking in with money as like chess without a chessboard. Like watching someone eat dinner, but you can't see their dinner plates. From the outside, we have a bias, right? Jim and I have the biggest bias because we've been watching foosball for decades. We love it. But if you're on the outside looking in, what are you trying to sell? So you got to have something to sell. And there's one idea that people should really think about, because I proved it works and I made it work and I just didn't take the money, is you can put together episodic incredible content. You can create a narrative. You can have it. My Thunderdome tournament was one winner. It followed 64 people to a logical conclusion of one champion. It had the biggest payout for an amateur, I think, in 40 years. It's an $8,000 payout. This kid got paid. Everybody wanted to see the end of the story. The investors I was presenting to want to see the end of the story. You put together the content and you get advertising minutes. You sell the advertising minutes. That becomes where your money comes from. It doesn't have to come from the players. That's Correct. Just one idea, though. Like, I'm sitting here preaching about my one idea. There are a million ideas. You just got to be creative and look for them. To your point, Jim, and this is where Ryan, and I'm really hopeful, he's creative. I hope he makes it work. He's got sponsors. He figures out what they're buying, what they're selling, what they're advertising. I love all that, and I believe in him, and I want it to work. If that's not the case, you have a aging population, a diminishing return. We've been trying to get more and more money from the same population of people by adding more events, and you can only soak blood from that rock. That isn't going to work. That works. Rock is almost out of blood. Anyway, I think we're all talking about the same thing. Back to you, Rich. We're talking about looking at other methods to drive revenues beyond just the player base. And you guys are even more fortuitous than us, because in Europe, at least, I think you have, maybe not Romania, or maybe Romania, but these other countries like Germany and France have a population of youth that end up, subsidizing the revenues, right?
Yeah, the junior scene is probably one of the big positives I would point to ITSF. There have been some very good decisions to have more juniors playing, events targeted at different age bands, some good stuff there. And it is easier over here to get tables into schools and set up that kind of feeder system. Yeah. I think continuing that work in the US is pivotal, because, the bar scene, I'm sure it exists to a certain extent, but it's a dying medium to go to a bar and play foosball and find your way into the game. So schools, colleges, youth centers, whatever option you have to get people playing young, some of them stick around. And I think there is a big opportunity here to almost jump on the anti-tech bandwagon and say, are you tired of your kids sitting on an iPad all day? Come play foosball socially, meet some people. I'm not the person to go and build that in the US, but I'm sure there are people over there who want to do it.
Yeah. Wow, we have to tail end here. We've gone over an hour easily. We're like an hour and 20, and I like to be respectful of the guest time specifically. What did I miss? Did I miss anything? Let's see. What is needed to drive change? Did we talk about that? Is it Rich? You ready to be the tip of the spear? What happens next, dude?
Maybe. I mean, I alluded to this. I would like to give the leadership at ITSF a chance to change things and to be more transparent and to share their strategy. Like, I think if that doesn't happen soon, there will be more people like me stepping up and just being angry, and that isn't good for foosball. Other than that, I don't really want to lead a revolution necessarily. That's a very kind of egotistical thing to think about. But I would like to be involved in, as I say, that feedback mechanism for ITSF, and as part of a drive to try different things, like real drastic changes, because we need them.
Okay, let me play devil's advocate or whatever. Let me play advocate. ITSF leadership, won't say names, come out and says tomorrow, you know what, you're right. Our agenda is to be recognized as a sport in every country to achieve Olympic recognition. That's our goal. That's our agenda. And we're not changing anything, though. We're not changing our format, our style. We're not changing the rules. This is the way we've been doing it. This is where we're going to do it. What's your very direct response to that?
So there are still some good things the community has come up with that would help achieve that goal. Like, just knowing that that's what we were aiming for, I could reposition the Romanian Federation to achieve that. I would be asking ITSF for support. So, if they want us to be a recognized sport in Romania, I need to have at least 3,000 members. So that shifts my focus in growing the player base at all costs. Maybe I don't care about pro players anymore. I just run, to the point actually Jeffrey is making kind of in the chat, I would be running a school program, and I would be working out, how do I actually get the kids to play? And do I need to hire resources? How do I pay those resources? Do I need to run clinics, youth training programs? Just knowing is a big step. If they're unwilling to change rules or anything else, and they keep pushing decisions that the players don't like, honestly, I would just step away from helping, and I'd try to find someone who does want to make that change. There's only so much I can bang my head against a wall before I, just get sick of it.
Yeah, Jim.
Well, I hope you bang your head for a little longer, Rich, because we do need people like you. Coming from the perspective of someone who has worked in the United States on foosball now for 4 or 5 decades, we aren't even to that point. We're not even to the stage of where Romania is in terms of a federation. And of course, one of the biggest countries in the world, historically one of the great foosball nations in the world. The United States has won more World Cups than any other country. The superstars, many of them, of course, from the United States. Yet we still are extremely disorganized here in this country. A great federation, of course, starts from the bottom with leadership from the top. It comes from local, it comes from state, it comes from regional, it comes to national. There has to be a network in this country that works together, that has a vision, maybe led by an enlightened ITSF. But we're not even to that point here in this country. And as someone who also has banged his head against the wall for a long time when it comes to this particular subject, that is the most frustrating thing for me as an American foosball player, an American foosball promoter, commentator, foosball man, is that for whatever reason, and for a short time, again, going back to John O'Brien, when his involvement with the Federation was making things happen here in this country, we are not even to that stage yet to where we are as organized as we need to be in order to actually maybe even take somewhat of a leadership role internationally and where the sport can go. So for me, it's hard for me to get past that first step of having a strong federation here in this country in order to make that impact internationally. And I think Fareed, in discussions I've had with him over the years, is also frustrated by that. In a country that in many ways, whether it's music, whether it's movies, whether whatever, has been a leader in the world. We are not, beyond the fact that we do produce and have produced great foosball players, many of whom now are over 50 years old. But still, that's the frustration for me. And maybe over the last year or two, I've stopped banging my head so much as well.
Look at this down here. This remark from Jeffrey about 300 tables at 200 middle schools in the Netherlands.
Yeah.
There are no new players coming from there unless you do clinics at the schools, which is, like I said, that's a missionary work in the best ways, man. Like you could do it if you can get out there, but holy smokes, the return on your time. If you have a family of your own and a job of your own, then you're really investing in, hopefully you're a distributor or something that makes a return on this, or you're really just bleeding your time for the love of the sport with an incremental return, right? And let me make sure this in the United States, okay, this is the way it's the United States. I don't know, like I don't want to make assumptions about kids, but even at a bar, you get 20 people playing at a bar, and your hope is that one or two of them maybe buy a table. Okay, maybe that happens, or they're feeding your coins. But after that, you're fortunate if you get one tournament player out of that, right? Because foosball is a recreational kind of fleeting interest. And so that has always been my problem. That's frankly my selfish disinterest in growing the sport by building players. It's never been my thing to get more players because it seems like the time sink is so horrendous for how much it takes to create one new player. I don't know, Rich, do you want to remark on this?
Well, I mean, the thing is that you are right. And this is something that the foosball community has to accept. I have not met anyone, and I've met a lot of federation presidents and spoken with a bunch of people who do lots of good admin work around the world. None of us are making money from this. And the type of people who are best suited to running the federation that Jim probably wants to see in the US, they are the guys who are going to volunteer. They're going to dump their own cash in, whether they think they will or not. They're going to invest so much time. It is effectively charity work at this stage. You know, maybe in 20 years' time, something comes back to you. But the people who do best in federations, they are the ones who expect nothing, give everything, and maybe at best get a thank you from time to time. And I know every time I get one of those within the Romanian community, it feels fantastic because it's actually quite rare. People, they know you're doing a good job, but they still want to complain about something. And you know, when someone is actually giving you the positive feedback, it's fantastic. So I would also give a quick encouragement that this might not be true in the US right now, but for anyone watching in Europe, do make the time to go and thank the people who are keeping the game alive in your country and those promoters and your people like Michael Stahl, who's been pointed out for, you know, the work they are doing. It does not pay the bills. It's all extracurricular. And we need more of those people. And it's just a sad fact, I think.
One of the things that I see, so I have a picture of you. I think it's which World Cup was it? It was like, was it 2009 or something? Or you
One of the
had
early known ones, yes.
And so what foosball can do to you if you're not careful, right? You get involved, you're bright-eyed, bushy-tailed, you love the sport. It's an obsession. It's a fixation. You think about it, you dream about it, you're involved in it, you're helping grow it. And all of a sudden you're in your 30s and you're like, good Lord, man, I've been bleeding for this sport. And you start losing some of that youthful vigor and enthusiasm because not only do you have the disillusionment with how you saw behind this the curtain on how the sausage is made, it's broken you down. And I want to bring Michael Stahl, right? Love him, man. I want him. God, he's being so successful right now. There's multiple posts about him, and we need him to continue to be like to do his thing. But you know, when the return's not there over time, you got Michael. I think he's in his mid 20s or late 20s, maybe early 30s. No kids, not married, right? He could like stay up all night and party all day, and then go to the schools and whatever it is. When it gets to the stage you are at now, Rich, where you're like, okay, I've been doing this for a long time. Look at how much time, energy, money I've invested in the sport, and where is it really headed? To Jim's earlier point, I hope this is a revelation for you to figure out how you could redirect new energies and continue to be engaged, whether or not it's with the ITSF. Right? I mean, I hope that we don't lose. We don't get the disillusionment we get out of you that unfortunately we may have got out of the other 7 members of the sports commission, right?
Apparently. Let me have one final thought on that. And you mentioned a return, right, for you going out and going to a school and doing a clinic or supporting foosball in whatever way you can. It's not going to be a financial return. It may not be a return of your player base saying thank you. But I think an environment can be created, whether it's internationally through the ITSF or whether it's through national federations, where just the fact that you feel that there is growth going on, that there is movement forward, that there are possibilities is enough to feed that, right? Enough to give you that feeling of, yes, I've gone out, I've contributed. And maybe that last element is the one that is sort of lacking. And I know in this country, to some degree, it is. But maybe that's all we can hope for, is that we are a part of something that is moving forward. And maybe that's what we're missing a little bit.
Yeah. Rich, are you coming to the Tornado World Series? What's your deal, man? Are you going to spend the 3,000 euros to? What's your deal, man? What's happening?
So I will be at Hall of Fame. I've already booked Vegas. Gambling is one of my vices, so you'll never keep me away. I'm very happy to have chats with people over there. If they want to buy me a coffee, feel free. I'm not sure. I will almost certainly be coming to. I'm going to say it anyway. I'm going to come to unofficial Worlds towards the end of the year. Like the September tournament for me is one of the highlights for Tornado, and I'm a big fan. Given I already have Vegas, I'm not sure I'm going to make it to Dallas. It's just too many trips too early. But you never know. I normally get 2-3 weeks out from a big Tornado event and then think, oh, I missed my window for cheap flights, and then just book them anyway. So, I'll pay for it one way or the other.
That's hilarious. I think, I know Freed's going to watch this. I know Freed, if he's not watching right now, he's going to watch it. And it's going to be great to hear his feedback and, see what he, if anything, what his opinions are going to be. It's been brilliant to have you. I still got to absorb stuff. Like my brain's all over the place and I got to absorb and I got to watch this and see what I said. I have no idea what I said. We got to hear what you had to say. I want to bring Jim in. Jim, what you want to close the loop on some thoughts here before we?
No, I just want to reiterate how important it is to have someone like Rich, who not only has ideas, has opinions, has complaints, and is willing to voice them, but also has the effort to the action to back it up, and how important that is. As someone who has, again, been involved for many decades, I have seen many, many people come and go. Many people who had great ideas, and once they ran into that first obstacle, that first challenge, moved on, right? And so a lot of it is, and we talked about Michael Stahl. I know he's encountered that. He is continuing to push forward, and I hope you do as well, Rich, because you are badly needed in the sport. And I guess the last thing, I'm looking at a message here from Sean Schwinard out of Michigan. And when it comes to the kids, above all else, it is about service, and it's about contribution. It's about getting that kid who can't play another sport to get out there and be able to compete, and that smile on his or her face as they do that. And maybe that's enough of a reward for many, is simply that. And that little piece, knowing that you're doing something for an individual, doing something for a family, doing something for the sport in that way. So thank you, Sean, for sort of illuminating that, and Michael Stahl continuing to do what he does here in this country, and for people like Rich, who are continuing to focus in on the things that need to improve as far as international foosball goes. So thank you, Rich.
My thoughts are, a couple things. Like, we're talking about a lot of different things. One of the things we're talking about is energy, time sink, mind share, all these things that play into how much you can invest in foosball. And my daughters are 11, right? There's no flipping way. Like there was a run where I won foosball tournaments, went to some foosball tournaments for streaming and like inside foos stuff. And I got to be very, very, I got to pick and choose. And you do too, Jim, because we're watching our kids grow up and we got to be careful of that time. And so Jim and I, like, this is a great opportunity to participate. I may still throw a couple masters. I won't name them. Did some work for me for the Thunderdome. They're expecting a tournament out of me. They're still waiting for it. I could fill that Thunderdome bracket or Ironman bracket in 3 weeks. I could do that, and I may be called to do that. But other than that, if this was and maybe Jim's getting closer because his kids are still very young. If this was a different era in my life, season of my life, there could be a lot more that could be done. But there isn't because of that. But outside of that, Jim and I are going to continue to do what we can do with our time that's available to us to carry the message and support. And we have our own skill sets and our own experience that really can help foosball. We just want to be fair with the limitations we have. Jim, Jim wrote a very emotional letter sometime back, maybe it was like 6 months ago, about how his time has changed and he can't support the sport as much as he used to be able to, but still wants to, and so we still will. There's a possibility you see us at the Tornado World Series. There's a possibility you see us other places doing stuff. But on that note, the Pandemonium is I guess a box where people can stand on that box and get a few more people listening. We've had a persistent 70 plus people in chat. I'm sure that's rotated out. Many more thousands of people will watch this. I'm not sure how much they'll watch, but they'll watch various amounts, and we'll watch the whole thing through. I know Trey Stites is going to watch that. He's the owner of Tornado. I know Fareed's going to watch this. So people that have influence, leverage, and visibility are going to watch this. And so I guess I'm talking a lot to say Jim and I are going to continue to be here. We're still here. We're still going to do stuff, and we're listening. And man, that's a lot. Is anybody?
That was awesome, Mark. That was really good. That was really. Sometimes, Mark. Sometimes you're really good. The shirt, but the rest of this, you've been solid.
You know that is it old school where Will Ferrell has a moment. He's in a debate and he just loses himself for a second and answers a question. Every once in a while, that happens with me. I want to thank all of you guests, man, for all you guys that have participated, all the questions. We didn't get to all of them, but there's going to be more Pandemoniums. Jim and I love doing this. There's going to be more stuff. We're going to analyze matches. We'll bring Rich back. Maybe we'll get Fareed in here, and we'll just keep the dialogue going. And I want to thank everybody for being a part of Pandemonium. We're signing off. Thank you.
Thanks, guys.